Ever notice how life's best stories don't happen in your living room? They happen on the open road, out on the water, or parked under the stars. At Progressive, they get that you want to focus on the experience, not worry about the what-ifs. That's why they offer quality insurance designed for your ride, whether that's a boat, RV, or motorcycle. Adventure with confidence. Visit Progressive.com and see how easy it is to protect your favorite way to get away. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in D.C. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hello, and welcome to It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and each week I'm joined by a panel of guests to discuss all things fandom and pop culture, primarily from a female perspective. You'll find everything from fanfic to cosplay to Schitt's Creek to Supernatural and everything in between. So put on your favorite piece of fandom merch, set aside that fanfic that you're writing about your OTP, and sit back and enjoy this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and we are kicking off Pride Month with a discussion about queer coding. And this was suggested by Ishel, so thank you so much, Ishel, for suggesting this. And Ishel is on here, and I will introduce her in just a moment. But thank you so much. I think this is a great topic to talk about. We've talked about queer baiting before, and they're kind of two sides of the same coin at times. So I'm sure some of the stuff we're going to talk about might veer into that territory as well. So let me introduce my lovely panel. First up, the co-host of Talking Like a Teen podcast, Ashley. Hello, Ashley.
Hi, Erin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And then next up, the person who suggested this episode, Ishel. Hello, Ishel.
Hello, Erin. And thank you for creating a space where we can have this kind of conversation. So very excited to have it.
Well, thank you for saying that. And thank you so much again for suggesting it. So I am excited for this one. But I am going to give you just kind of like the Wikipedia definition of queer coding and some trigger warnings, of course, because, it'd be weird if I didn't give trigger warnings for this episode. So queer coding is the attribution of stereotypically queer traits to fictional characters without explicitly stating their gender and sexual identity. Queer coding may have had a negative impact on perceptions of queerness in media, as villains are often queer-coded. Queer coding is a concept both in the discussion of media portrayal of LGBT people and academic research involving queer theory or gender studies. And of course, it really came about first in 1930 with the Hays Code, which was established to regulate content of films and prohibited the portrayal of homosexuality, which they said was deemed as those are sexualities you're not supposed to talk about. Because honestly, before the Hays Code, there were actually openly gay characters in media and in film. There was a lot more sexuality. There was a lot more embracing women working and all this stuff. And then the Hays Code came about and that all kind of changed. And so trigger warnings, of course, for homophobia, the big trigger warning there, transphobia, internalized homophobia as well. Those are the big trigger warnings here. I also, just in case it comes up, because I think all of this is kind of intrinsically linked as well, because when you start looking also at the Hays Code, there were also a lot of stuff that had to do with racism as well. So trigger warning for racism too. Okay, so what I first want to start out with is, what is the first example, Ashley, that you remember of queer coding? And it's okay if it's not something that's commonly brought up.
I think you've got to kind of address the Disney of it all. Basically, entire generations, multiple generations at this point, of kids were brought up seeing
every Disney animated movie with a queer-coded villain, and they're the best characters in those movies more often than not, but that's not really the point. The problem with that intrinsically is, again, tying that stuff to the morality of them being villains. That's not great. Outside of that, probably Buffy and Faith is one that I feel like I definitely clocked when I watched that as it happened.
Yeah. So, Ishel.
Okay, now look, I am not saying that this was written to be queer coded, but this is what I'm just gonna say. My pick here is gonna be a little crazy. Okay, it's gonna be a little crazy, and possibly controversial. To use an apt reference here, I'm gonna come out of left field and say that to me, even though I didn't perceive it this way at the time, looking back on it and not counting the Disney villains of it all, I'm gonna say Smalls from Sandlot to me. So, I can see him as, now clearly the time he lived in, the environment he lived in, did not allow him to be his bi-curious self. But I'm gonna say that I picked up on it being there. Now I don't want to rob this movie of its innocence, though I will say it's okay for us to talk about like Squints, who did the whole fake drowning thing to make Wendy kiss him. But if I say Smalls might be a little bit gay, all of a sudden it's a problem. So I want people to sit in their discomfort about that. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and you both brought up stuff that are marketed towards children, and that's often like the excuse you will hear from people. Well, this is marketed towards children, so why do we need to have that in there? But like Ishel said, you will have plenty of depictions of heterosexuality and, boys and girls, and the boy teasing the girl and showing that's because he likes her as little kids. You'll have plenty of that. And nobody really blinks an eye at that or blinks at that or, complains about that. But if it's even like mentioned that it could be a queer character, that is a big no-no. So I think that's a really good point for both of those, because it is true. It's like, you'll hear that all the time. That's the big argument. Recently here, they had this production of the play. Oh God, I can't remember now. It was the Shrek the Musical, okay? And there was a big controversy because they were putting it on in a town here in Colorado, in Parker, and Parker is part of Douglas County in Colorado, and Douglas County and El Paso County are the most conservative counties in Colorado because we're a blue state, but we were purple for a while and then became blue kind of thing, and we still have a lot of conservative people around, and Douglas County is a very conservative area. And this play that was being put on in Parker, they had a pride flag that they brought out on stage, and parents were up in arms and furious about this because they're like, this is a child's play. We can't have that. I'm like, so like they're like having sex on stage. It's a flippin' flag. You'd be fine if it was the flippin' American flag. You'd be like, oh, yay, red, white, and blue. But another flag, and you're like, no, we can't have that. So I do think that's a good point to make, because you'll see that argument being made that, well, but it's children, which is just bullshit. It's just an excuse and another reason to be prejudiced and to be homophobic and biphobic and transphobic. It's just another excuse. It's like people hiding behind religion. It's the same thing. It's just a way for you to excuse your bigotry because you can't come right out and admit your bigotry. Instead, you want to hide behind something else. So yeah, mine is totally different than what's been mentioned. Mine is from the 80s, from 1987 to be exact. And that is Mannequin. And that is the character of Hollywood Montrose, played by Meshach Taylor, who also arguably had another character that was very queer-coded in designing women. But this is the character I'm going to focus on because Hollywood was very queer-coded. This character it was never explicitly stated, but from the mannerisms, from his style, from how he was into fashion, the way he was. Because you had, of course, Andrew McCarthy's character was into fashion, but that was a little bit different. It was, he didn't dress quote unquote fashionably. Have you both seen Mannequin? Please tell me you've both seen Mannequin.
It's been a long time, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You've never seen
But
Mannequin?
I don't.
I'm sorry.
I've never heard this word.
I'm saying this like it's a great movie. It's not necessarily, but for me, it's like part of my youth, and I was obsessed with this movie. It's about a mannequin that comes to life. That's literally what it's about. But Hollywood is like the supporting character, and he is very into fashion, and he dresses fashionably, 80s fashionably. And he has different pairs of sunglasses that are all like really cool and stylish, 80s stylish. And he's very flamboyant, and the way he, even the way he like holds himself, his posture, and some of the stuff he says is very extremely, extremely queer coded. There is like no way to watch that and not see that, I think. And so to me, that's the first example, because it was never outright stated, but it was pretty much implied in everything that was said. He even has an emotional crying moment kind of thing, And so, yeah, so that's my first one from the 80s. And I was expecting more of a reaction when I said Mannequin, so I'm a little bit like, remember Mannequin?
Sorry.
There's even an article titled Mannequin is even gayer than you thought. Anyway, we'll have to cover Mannequin some here on the podcast. We'll do Mannequin and we'll do Weekend at Bernie's. We'll do a double feature of these Andrew McCarthy movies that kind of fit together in a weird way. So, Ashley, as Ishelle said, why not just make it queer? Do you think queer coding is still in media today, or still has a place in media? And do you think it is still harmful or can be very harmful? Or do you think there's ever a time when it's not harmful?
It's bad. Just do gay shit. I don't know. There's one very, very niche example. I watched a YouTube video by Jessie Gender, who is a content creator who I love dearly, that did a video about all of the live action Disney remakes and how, in kind of trying to dress those up for a modern audience, they've had to like straighten out the villains and how it makes them incredibly boring and lame now. So that was kind of the only thing where I'm like, I mean, the damage is kind of already done. Like, just own it. But it's Disney and they don't want anybody to get their panties in a twist. So, but yeah, I it's one of those that, like, honestly, on the whole, yeah, exactly. Just make them queer. Like, the representation is so vastly needed right now. Like, just do it. It's okay.
Yeah, Ishelle.
I mean, I would be willing to like listen to an argument that it has some place. Like, I can definitely, if someone were to say like, oh, there might be times where you can sneak it into some show that's like largely consumed by people who have the sins of Fox News running in their veins. But generally, I think queer coding is meant to be a call to queer people, not really a tactic to try to convert bigots to allies. So I think if you want to reach queer people, you want to reach a queer audience, then just grab them, gay it up, like don't beat around the bush, because I do think it does more harm than good. I think it reinforces the belief that queer people need to be tucked away in the back somewhere and that they're not fit for public consumption in overt ways, and that like it's something that we don't talk about. And yeah, and to what you were saying earlier, Erin, about like us using examples of things that were maybe marketed toward children, like queerness is not simply about who you are having sex with. It is so much broader than that. And there's this author who's going to be at Queers and Quills, which we'll talk about later. And his name is Jeffrey K. Davenport. And he writes Black gay romance books that are very fun and heartfelt. I highly recommend starting with Meet Me in the Sky by him. Anyway, I heard him on a panel last year, and he was saying that the sexual identity of his characters is the least interesting thing about them. Like, their sexuality can just be a fact, and it doesn't have to be the focus of that character in his story, because there's this whole world that they're living in. They just kind of happen to be gay men in this world that he's writing. Don't take that as me saying, like, you can be gay, but don't shove it in my face. Like, that's not at all what I mean. But I'm saying that having queer characters isn't about forcing an agenda. It's about reflecting a reality, because they do exist. Another reason I find it problematic is because it relies heavily on stereotypes. And so the execution of it, the interpretation of it has to boil down all the complexities of queerness into these visual cues. And so unfortunately, because of that, we get these very surface, at times offensive and clumsy depictions of this queerly coded character. And so that's why you get something. And I do remember watching Designing Women. I think it's supposed, because it was the black guy and he's like with all the women. Yep. I watched that with my grandma. Probably when it was syndicated. But anyway, I watched it. And so it has to make them this almost very like over the top kind of thing, because it's like we want to drive home the point that you're supposed to think that maybe this is a queer person. And so it's like, but not all queer people are like that. Not all of them dress well. Not all of them care about design, So yeah, I think that's something that's very problematic about it. Yeah, or those are many things that I find problematic about it. So yeah, I'm like, if you're going to do the gay thing, just do the gay thing. Or the queer thing, do the queer thing.
Amen.
Yeah, I think, I think what happened is, and this tends to happen, is in media and in entertainment, is they're like, okay, we got to the point where we had representation. We have a few shows that have representation. That's enough. We don't need to go any further. We don't need to keep doing it. We've got this. You've got this. What more do you need? What more do you want? I really think that's a lot of what ended up happening. And, it's a business. And so sadly, their thought is, well, we can't alienate the homophobic crowd, so we can't make it explicitly that way. And it's kind of like, this is like, you have to grow past this. You can't keep doing the same thing you've been doing. And queer coding to me is taking a step back from any kind of progress. I think there could be moments of like, where you're like, where people are exploring their sexuality or exploring different elements where maybe it's not like outwardly like they're like, this is what we're exactly exploring. But if you're doing it in a way like for example, and this is not, I don't think this is a queer coded film, because this film is very explicitly trans allegory, very much. And that's I Saw the TV Glow, which is a fantastic film from Jane Schoenberg, who they also have another film coming out this year that's a take on the slasher genre. And it's very much a film about being trans and a character that their battle and struggle with coming to terms with who they are. And it's very much, that's what the film is. They never once use the word trans. So I guess you could say, I have a hard time calling that queer coding, because I think it's a little bit different, because the creator is very open and very, they're very open about what the movie is about, but it's told in a way where it's like, they watch this show, and that's where kind of the I Saw the TV Glow comes from. And the show is very much inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't know if either of you have seen this fantastic, amazing, incredible film. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Have either of you seen this movie?
No, it sounds awesome, though.
It's an incredible film. It's very, very sad and heartbreaking, I will tell you that. But it is a beautiful film, and the main performance by Justice Smith is just absolutely mind-blowingly good. We talked about this. Carla and I did a whole episode about the film a couple of years ago. Look for an episode of My Streaming Bubble with Carla, me, and Jen talking about it. And the reason that one is okay to me is because even though one of the characters is very open about their sexuality and says very openly, I like girls, it still is this thing where the main character is never quite open with about who they are. So I think there could be some, You could maybe make the argument that there's a little bit of queer coding in there, but that to me is so different because it is a movie that is strictly about, it's very open about what it's about. And it's about the heartbreak of not being who you truly are and denying who you are and how that can literally, suffocate you. And so it's a fantastic film. It is a horror movie, but it's not a horror movie. It's a horror movie because of how horrific the topic is and how horrific it is when don't feel like you can be who you are. And there are some little horror elements to it, but it's just a really amazing, beautiful film. The music is amazing. Everything about that movie is so good. I highly, highly recommend it. I think you can stream it right now on, I believe, HBO Max. I don't know. I own it. But I recommend that. And I can't wait for the next movie that they did, which is all about just like a take on the slasher genre. So I'm very excited about that too. Anyway, so I do think though that it is taking like 20 steps back when you're still using queer coding and you're not being open about what you're doing or you're using it as like, and a lot of that goes actually to queer baiting, I think too, is where you'll see it more. And like one of the examples that I've seen in a lot of YouTube videos is actually The Good Place, which I love that show. But Eleanor in there is very clearly coded to be bisexual. And she never outright comes out, or you never actually get a scene of her with anyone that she has wanted to kiss or wanted to be with that is a woman. You see her with Chidi, you see her with other men, but you never see that. You just hear her making comments about being sexually attracted to certain female characters in the show, but they never explicitly do it. And that one to me is like this way of like, we're going to still do it, but we're going to do it in this way where we're not necessarily doing like a stereotype. Like we're not like, oh, well, she's bi, so we're going to make her like a slut or something, which is honestly what is done a lot. Instead, we're just going to kind of hint at it and make it so that it seems like we're very accepting and open and to sexuality, but we're not going to explicitly show it. So it's like we're not as bad as the other queer coding because we're not playing into the stereotypes as much and we're still giving you a taste of it, but it's okay that we're not explicitly showing it. And I think that's also what a lot of people in media do now. It's like the whole thing with Beauty and the Beast, speaking of Disney. I should know this because I actually love Beauty and the Beast. But the guy who works with Gaston and is basically in love with Gaston.
LeFou.
Thank you. LeFou. So he was going to have like an explicitly like, they were going to be like, okay, we are going to have him come out. And basically it was just he danced with a guy and it was never explicitly stated. So it's like that whole thing of like, these characters are, but we don't have to explicitly say it, but we're still giving it to you. Isn't that enough? It's that kind of thing of like, here's a little breadcrumb, here's a little piece of cheese kind of thing almost. Like, here you go, here's a little bit of it. We're not outright necessarily always playing into the stereotypes anymore, or we're trying not to, but we're still not going to explicitly have them come out or make them be queer, but we are going to still kind of code them that way and you can kind of just fill in the blanks. I think it's dangerous also because it shows anyone who is struggling with their identity that it's not okay to be explicitly who you are. You can still be who you are, but not explicitly. So like you can hint at it, but no one can truly know who you are because that's not safe and it's not accepted and it's not okay. And it's not safe for other people that are going to be quote unquote offended or aren't going to be able to deal with it. So you can be yourself up to a point and then it's not okay beyond that point. I will just quickly say, because I think the horror genre is an amazing genre to look at with all of this. We did a whole episode years ago about queer horror, and I recommend listening to that. I think in that genre, I think it's better than it used to be for sure, like a lot better. And I think that's because horror always tends to be more progressive than other genres. That's why I call it the punk rock genre of film, because it takes chances when other genres don't. I'm not saying it always succeeds, but it does take chances when others won't. It'll have very open queer characters, and it'll be open. It won't just be a hint at it. I mean, you even have all the way back to The Hunger, and there was a love scene between two women, a sex scene between two women in that movie. And it wasn't just about the sex scene. It was also just being very open about their sexuality. But I think horror also, it's easier to do that because you can be like, some of this is a fantasy world, so people can accept it a little bit more. But once again, I do think horror pushes the boundaries before a lot of other genres do. So I think they actually are a lot better at this than other genres are about inclusivity and not doing as much queer coding. Because, of course, their biggest issue has always been a lot of villains in horror movies being very, very, very queer coded, all the way back to, I mean, it was before this too, but of course, one of the biggest examples of this is Norman Bates in Psycho. It's very, 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 very queer coded. So, yeah. And then there'll be other ones that don't feel as like in Scream. Scream is very queer coded with Ghostface in the first Scream, mainly with the spoilers for Scream, everybody, with Stu and Billy, the two killers, very queer coded. And Matthew Lillard has very much embraced that, which you can appreciate when actors are willing to look at that, as long as they're not also queer baiting. Misha Collins. I mean, I know a lot of other actors do it too, but yeah. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about fandom and queer coding. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Hey, my dog lovers, stop picking hairs off your jumper and listen up. The National Dog Survey from Dogs Trust is back, and whether you have your own dog or just admire them from afar, we want the full scoop. From the joyful moments that make you laugh to the soggy splashed-filled ones you'd rather not relive. Just 15 minutes today could make a huge difference for the nation's dogs of tomorrow. Join our muddy-trousered community by searching Dogs Trust National Dog Survey.
Okay, so we are going to now turn to fandom and queer coding. So fandom, of course, is where all the way back to, of course, Spock and what's his name? Oh my gosh,
Captain Kirk.
Thank you. Which was like where like fanfic started with like Star Trek and shipping the two of them together. So if people like to say that fanfic is new, that's bullshit. So, but are there any bad examples, or do you think sometimes fans go too far of using or interpreting a character as queer?
I think for me, for the most part, I am very like live and let live. Like, yes, to me, for example, like Willow and Tara is it. If you're a Willow and Kennedy person, like, good on you. We can have that conversation until it becomes, there are those people that take it a step too far, where it becomes like, it's my way or the highway, or it becomes like a personal attack kind of deal. I also, you kind of hinted at this earlier, I don't love like queer baiting in general. I especially don't love it when it kind of leaves the screen and becomes kind of like a real life thing. Like the Teen Wolf stuff is a good example, where they had those two actors kind of hanging all over each other and playing into it very much to like get people to vote for them for award shows and that kind of stuff. And it reads a little gross. It's just not great.
Yeah. Where they're using the fandom because the fandom will.
Yeah, it's very manipulative, and you don't need to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's been going on when lots of fandoms, lots of forever, Yeah. So, Ishel.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to name any names of any fandoms or ships on here.
Ishel's like, I'm coming for all of you.
Yeah, but no. But there are definitely some cases where I think, and now I know queer baiting and queer coding are two different things, but there are definitely some cases where I think fans are misinterpreting queer baiting, or not even actual queer baiting, but like pseudo queer baiting, just because like the people, the creators and the actors or whatever are aware of it. Now, some cases they're really doing it, but in other cases, I think that some fans are interpreting that as being queer coding because they want it to be queer coding. And I really just can't see how anyone wins from that. I think that the hyper fixation on it is not healthy. It impacts how you consume the art because I think it narrows your focus too much to where you're just like, what about this? What about this? What about, oh, and they did this and they drank the bottle like that and they put this over here. And so it's just like, what are we even doing at this point? And I think the projection isn't like projecting that onto characters isn't always healthy because you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment with that. And rather than finding media where queerness is actually celebrated, demanding that juice from a stone just seems foolhardy to me. And there are not nearly enough shows or movies that feature, let alone center, queer characters in narratives. But I think I say like show up for the ones that do rather than trying to bend someone who's set on being straight, And yeah, just I think instead of putting like all of that fandom effort into these wild investigations of every tiny little thing in every episode or every movie, use that talent to go like find and support the people who are making what you would like to see, the kind of content that you would like to see. Yeah. And also, I think going back to what Ashley was saying, like when it kind of breaks containment, when it spills over into the real world and people are like harassing the creators and harassing the actors and that sort of thing. And when they get into the whole like real person shipping fiction thing, like I think when all of that is happening because you have projected so much of this, like clearly this person is queer coded, they have to be like, I just think that is very unhealthy and that's way too far. Yeah. And yeah, I think, you kind of just ruin fandoms are always going to be torn to shreds over ship wars. That's just always going to happen, I think, because people are people. But I think it just kind of ruins the experience for the people creating it too, when that just kind of takes over everything. Now, some of them do play into it and play it up because they know what sells. But for others, I do think it comes to a point where it's just like, this is really, I want to be excited about this art that I'm making, but I can't because this has just gotten a little wild. So I say, keep it in the fan fiction, my love.
Yeah. So remember, you can come after me and not Ashley and Ishel because I'm going to be talking mainly about Supernatural here because this is probably the biggest experience in that. And yes, a lot of this will be queer baiting, which is like the other side of the coin for queer coding, but I think it's so close together that's why I'm kind of putting them together. But anyway, so like with Supernatural and in particular with Dustiel, which is the ship of Dean Winchester and Castiel, and Cass is an angel. And if you don't know, spoilers for the end of Supernatural, Cass in it was episode 18, I believe, of season 15, and Cass basically comes out and tells Dean he loves him. And that, for me, it's a very emotional scene because for different reasons, because Dean gets to finally hear about who he really is to people and how Dean is just pure love. And that's what I've always thought. And so he talks about that and talks about, that you're love and blah, 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 blah. And I love you. And that's something you never, ever, 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 ever thought the show would do, because that show is one of the worst examples of queer baiting ever, 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 ever. I don't care what you say, that show queer baited. Plain and simple. The creators queer baited. Most of the actors, mainly Misha Collins, but other actors as well, queer baited. the show was very explicitly did things with the character of Dean Winchester where they were queer baiting, especially with him and him being bisexual. And so the second cast does that, though, and trigger warnings for the bury your gays trope. The second he does that, he's sent to literal, like it's almost like the people have called it super hell. He dies literally 2 seconds after he says that. He dies. He goes to the empty, which is a thing from Supernatural. If you know Supernatural, you know, I'm not going to go into the whole thing about it. So it is a horrible thing if like the actors, the director, the creators were like, isn't this amazing that we did this for you? Yet you instantly killed him. And everybody's like, because in Supernatural, people don't die. They come back constantly. Dean Winchester has died over 150 times, okay? It happens. They just come back. Most of those were actually in just one single episode. But anyway, so everybody was expecting that in the end, he'd come back, he'd come back, he'd come back. And there were 2 episodes left. And he never came back. He was mentioned in the end that he was okay and he was in heaven. And that's where Dean is and everything like that. The bullshit, stupid finale. And so it's mentioned, but you still did that. And Dean never, ever, ever, ever comes out or explicit or returns that or says, I love you back or anything like that. And that is probably one of the worst cases of queer baiting in recent memory is that show. I do think, though, where it became bad with Destiel shippers, and once again, this is me saying it, not Ashley, not Ishel, is I think at this point, Destiel shippers queer bait themselves. I honestly, because when The Boys was coming out and everybody knew that Misha and Jared were going to be on there, because there's also a ship, and trigger warning for incest, where people ship Sam and Dean, who are brothers. That's a totally different thing. It's gross, disgusting, in my opinion. Ugh, yuck. But anyway, so they were going to be on there, and everybody's like, this means Destiel will become canon. I'm like, first of all, this is the character Soldier Boy. Why would you ever want, like, Soldier Boy is a disgusting piece of shit. He's not Dean Winchester. But they turned it into that. And I'm like, this poor fandom, the Boys fandom, was inundated with that, where they turned it into Supernatural 2.0. And I'm like, this is The Boys. It's totally different. There's also real life shipping, so big time in Supernatural. People ship Misha Collins and Jensen Ackles. People also big time Jensen and Jared. That's even bigger. And they think their wives are beards and they're secretly together. There's even like rumors of like tunnels and like all this. It's really outrageous. So I think that's where it really crosses the line, where you're like, okay, so basically we're going to bring this drama and we're going to bring this ship into every other aspect, including the actors' real lives. We're also going to bring it into other shows such as 911. They did it with 911 because that ship on there, Buddy, which is the big ship, which of course, spoilers for 911, Buck did come out as bi, which I thought was amazing, incredible. I love that that happened. Eddie is not out at all, but that's the big ship there. I frankly hate the character Eddie, so whatever. I don't care about that ship, but I love Buck. But there was a whole episode that 911 did this past year, which I thought was an awful episode. But anyway, in the episode, Buck and Eddie are driving and they're listening to Carry On My Wayward Son. And if you know Supernatural, that's by Kansas. If you know Supernatural, at the season finale of every season of Supernatural, they play Carry On My Wayward Son over the recap of the season. It became known as kind of like the anthem of Supernatural. I even have a Supernatural shirt that says Carry On My Wayward Son. That is basically just also a salute to Supernatural. And so when the Destiel shippers saw this, they went, this is a nod to us. That song has been popular for decades. Mm-hmm. Kansas is a hugely popular band. Spoilers, we're going to be talking about Kansas in September. And that is a humongously popular song, okay? It didn't just become popular with Supernatural. Yes, it's associated with that, but people have to realize not everybody in the world watched Supernatural. And even though that is one of the most passionate fan bases, it still doesn't mean that like everybody out there knows what you're talking about. So they saw that and they were like, if Buddy happens, if Buck and Eddie get together, it's because of Destiel. And I realized some of it was in jest, but it's still, I mean, can you imagine being a 911 fan and you have nothing to do with Supernatural and your fandom gets invaded by all these people from Supernatural saying this is Destiel related when there's nothing except for them singing that song. No other moment, unless I'm forgetting, in all of 911 has ever been related to Destiel at all. It's the weirdest thing. And so that's when I think it gets bad. And I think that fandom has gotten to that point. And I understand they were queer baited. I understand it was really awful. But there is a point where you kind of cross over and you're baiting yourself. And they keep expecting it's going to happen in some way. And it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's just never going to happen. We're never going to get a season 16 of Supernatural. If we do, it's going to be way in the future. And it's just, it'll probably be like a reboot. So it's not going to happen. And people in the fandom invading other fandoms and saying this is proof that this is going to happen is just really makes you look bad. And I think in a way shines, a bad light to some aspects of fandom and especially to that fandom, and can also make people be like, see, this was never a real ship. You all are exaggerating and making this up. This was never really something that they were baiting you with, And then the other person that does it is Misha Collins. Misha Collins, his whole financial everything is rooted a lot in Destiel. Everybody champions, gets so excited because he will openly talk about it. But the reason he's doing that, in my opinion, is not genuine. He is doing that because, frankly, he doesn't have a career. I'm sorry, but he doesn't really have much of a career except for conventions. And I'm not putting that down because conventions are amazing. The Supernatural conventions are something very special. But that's where his career is, and that's where his bread and butter is. And he knows he can make money off of those people. So he keeps baiting them and baiting them and baiting them. You say what you want about Jensen Ackles. I know he's said some stuff that has upset people when it comes to this ship, but say what you want. But there's maybe been one instance when he has never, ever queer baited people with this. So that's the other part that gets wrong. I know I went very long and I went longer than both of you, and I apologize, but it's something that really just irritates me, is the fact that there was a very legitimate reason to be upset with that show and to call it out for what it did. And for, there was so much queer coding in that show, and not just with Dean, although Dean was the main person, but not just with Dean. But when you end up taking that after the show has been over for 5 years now, almost 6, and you take that and you take it and put it into other fandom spaces, that's, to me, icky. I mean, I don't know, maybe there was a writer on 911 that loved Supernatural and put that in there, but I don't think it would necessarily be because of Destiel. It would probably be, we love Supernatural, let's put this song in here. But it's like, okay, people, come on. I know I'm friends with some of you who probably feel this way, and I love you, and I remember it's just me saying this. It's not Ashley and Eshell. So if you get mad at anyone, get mad at me, okay? Because I know this fan base, and every year there's younger fans watching it because, of course, it's now on Peacock, and, people rediscover it. You can listen to It's a Dean Thing. We analyze Dean Winchester, deeply analyze Dean Winchester. We go season by season. We're finishing up season 5, so we're on that season right now. We're going to talk about Destiel. We already sort of have, so yeah. Okay, so I'm done. But I do want to know, are there any good examples, Ashley, when you for fandom with queer coding and everything like that?
I think, honestly, for me, as long as you're kind of living and let live, any interpretation of a character that brings you comfort or joy is a net positive, is good shit. There's a clip that I love of somebody asking Mark Hamill if he thought that Luke Skywalker is gay, and he's like, if you think that he is, then he is. And that's kind of how, again, as long as you're being chill about it and not making it everybody else's, not problem, but problem. Go forth, headcanon the world queer. We love it.
I love that. Headcanon the world queer. So, Ishelle?
I guess I'll use this one. I was going to go with Luca because I think that's a really cute movie, but I can barely remember it. But so I'm going to go with Elsa from Frozen, our Arrow Ace Queen, who is out there doing all the queen stuff without chasing after no man, and ain't no man chasing after her. And she's figuring out her own stuff, and she's protecting the forest and whatnot. And I think that one is they're not going to ever say anything about that, but probably to confirm anything, I doubt that they ever would. But I definitely think that's a queer-coded character, and I think that's a great example because all of the Disney princesses are with some man, or, and they're that's the whole thing, is about the relationship, and they don't really get much autonomy outside of that. So I'm going to go with Elsa.
Yeah, I haven't seen Frozen, but I've seen so much stuff about Frozen, especially with preparing for this episode. So good one. I'm going to go with the positive. I'm going to say I want to shout out a creator that I think, the creator Brian Fuller, who created the show Hannibal, which granted, I cannot handle this show. I have a thing with the character of Hannibal Lecter that there's something about that character that I actually hate Silence of the Lambs. I know everybody loves that movie. I hate that movie. And a lot of it's because of the Hannibal character. But if you don't know, the Hanagram is the big ship in that. And that is the ship of Will Graham, played by Hugh Dancy, and Dr. Hannibal Lecter, played by Mads Mikkelsen in the show Hannibal. And I didn't make it through to the end because I'm a horror person, but I could not handle that show. Someday I'm determined actually to watch it again. But Brian Fuller has very much said no. He's come out and said, yes, they are. And if I had kept going, he's alluded to that he would make them canon. And a lot of that, I think, came about because that fandom was so passionate about that. And I think that's when a positive can happen, is when it's approached in a way where it's not bullying and there's an open conversation with the creator. The creator is very open to it. And I think that is an example where it was a positive. It was a net positive because the creator embraced that and loved it and wanted people to keep writing their fics and wanted people to keep shipping that and loved that people did. And he acknowledged that if the show had not been canceled, that's where it would be likely headed. And that is an example also of a show that I don't think really you could say was, I guess you could say queer baiting because the show was canceled. So I kind of don't even think of that one as necessarily completely queer baiting. So I think that is a positive where it was fans noticed it. The creator was not opposed to it and actually embraced it and actually acknowledged it and actually said, yes, that's what I want to. So that's one I will use, even though I have not finished that show. I understand. I know it's supposed to be fantastic. The two actors are great. There's a scene in that show in the first season. And I remember when I was watching it, because I finally was watching the show, and I was like, this aired on ABC? How in the hell did they air this on ABC? I still can picture the scene, and I'm like, I don't know how they got away with this. Okay, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we are just going to have some fun and just mention 3 characters, max, that we think are queer, and you can mention why as well. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we are having a dreaded 3 in this. Can you believe I'm making you do a dreaded 3 in this episode? Yes, because even though when Ishelle put on there, this was a suggestion on with the topic, you didn't put a limit. I put a limit. So this is not Eshell. This is me going, no, you cannot mention more than 3. Because I like to torture you all. So, Ashley, what are 3 of the characters you want to mention?
Barbie from the Barbie movie is an Arrow Ace icon. Queen shit. Love her. Frog and Toad are boyfriends. I'll fight you. And then the last one that I had is a video game. Sorry. So Mass Effect is a video game where you're a person in space and you recruit a team to basically fight a bunch of aliens. And as you're recruiting your team, you get to become closer to them and you can romance them. And there's one character in particular who, her name is Jack. She has space magic. She's very cool. She's very, very queer coded. She's very tough, that kind of thing. But you can only romance her if you play the male version of the main character. And come to find out that, like, years after the game released, the developers said that they were going to make her bisexual, but that they just didn't have time. / it was 2012. I don't think they wanted that smoke, honestly. But justice for Jack. She may be, so that one may be kind of a gray area, but she's queer in my heart.
Yeah, that's all that matters, is the way, art is up for interpretation, So, yeah. And I like the Barbie one. That's a great one. Yeah. Eshell.
All right. So none of these are who I had in mind when I pitched the topic for this episode. In fact, nothing I have said today is what I had in mind when I pitched the topic for this episode. but here we go. Okay. So I don't want to offend any cultures, but I'm going to say Lee from Mulan, because he was definitely starting to fall for Mulan when she was peeing. And Mulan is like my favorite Disney movie. And yeah, so I'm going to go with Lee. He was definitely bisexual because his reaction to finding out that it was actually a woman was not what it should have been for if he wasn't already a little bit lost. So I'm going with him. Then I'm going to say, okay, I'm kind of going to cheat here. Velma and Roxy in Chicago, definitely in the movie.
Love that.
Strong lesbian vibes there. A lot of like competitive, very charged tension going on, but also a level of like mutual, if begrudging, respect between the two of those. So yeah, definitely them. And then I'm also going to say, I can't remember their names, but the 2 male leads in Challengers, that tennis movie, I think that, yeah, and I'm counting them as one also. So I'm kind of cheating here. I mean, I think they're both very bi romantically, but also I think sexually too. Now, and here's the thing about Challengers. I can't tell if it's a good movie with problems, a problematic movie, or just bad tennis. And, I haven't read any like think pieces on it or whatever because I'm not a film critic. But for me, I needed it to be gayer. And I think like both of the men in the movie are obviously very queer coded. I mean, they have them literally like fisting churros with like while their faces are like 2 inches apart in that movie. And because of that, I have made up my mind. I'm going to say it's a good movie with problems. And the biggest problem is the fact that it should have been gayer. So those are my three queer things.
So mine are going to be really, except for one, are going to be really like probably out there and not really ones. But I was like, I'm going to do ones that aren't really thought of ever by most people, except for one. And that'll be the first one I'll just briefly say because I've spent enough time talking about Supernatural. Dean Winchester. Yes, Dean Winchester is definitely bi. Even if I ended up not shipping Destiel anymore in the show because mainly the fandom turned me off about it. But I still think Dean and Benny was actually who I shipped more than Dean and Cass in the end. Although I would have been fine if they became canon. I know they sort of became canon, but they sort of didn't. So, but yes, Dean is definitely bi. And I think it would have been amazing if they would have actually made him canonically. I can't speak. If they would have actually had the guts to do that. And then the other two are going to be kind of out of left field. I watch Family Ties all the time because Roku has a Family Ties channel, or it's actually Pluto, but I watch it on Roku. And so you can watch Family Ties any time of day, anytime, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. Family Ties is on 24/7 on this channel. I understand there are problems galore with this show. I watched this show as a kid. Okay, this show is like comforting for me. It's like, it comforts me. The character of Jennifer Keaton, I think, if the show was made today, would probably be bi or pansexual. I can't explain all my reasons why. I just kind of read her that way when I'm rewatching it. And I just think it would have been an interesting thing to explore, especially with her 60s parents who were hippie parents, and see how open-minded they really were. I think that would have been an interesting thing to explore. Of course, she would have had to deal with her, Republican brother, Alex. So that would have been hard. But I just think it would have been an interesting thing to do with Jennifer, because I don't think the show really ever knew what to do with her. So that's my second one. And then my last one, I have to mention something that has to do with Halloween. I'm sorry, but I have to do some kind of horror. And I'm going to say Laurie Strode is a lesbian. I think Laurie Strode is gay. And this was one that just kind of came to me today, honestly. I've never thought about this before, but I think even in the original Halloween, 1978, I think she probably really, really liked her friend Annie. And it would have been interesting if they would have gone that route and got the two of them together. I know there's never been anything explicitly or even that much queer coding with her, but that just kind of hit me today. So that's my really out there one. Maybe Jennifer Keaton's the most out there one, but that's my other one. Because add that into my franchise that I adore. I wouldn't say make Michael, because I think Michael, there are some interpretations that people have had of queer interpretations of Michael, which happens a lot with slashers. I just think that plays too much into the villain thing and everything. Because honestly, I don't think a lot of the reason he kills has anything to do with sexuality, even though I know a lot of people are going to scream at that because he kills a lot of people. He's killed people when they've had sex and stuff, but I think it's a little bit different with him. Anyway, but those are mine. Dean Winchester, which is the most obvious of all of them as far as like ones that people have mentioned over and over again. Jennifer Keaton, and then Laurie Strode. I'm sticking with those. That would have been so interesting to do that with Laurie. So it is time to play 6 Degrees of Mr. Finn Whitrock. So did both of you play?
I did.
Yay. So Ashley, what did you use? How did you connect Finn? What did you connect him to?
I connected Finn to Jennifer Hale, who is she voices the main character in Mass Effect, the video game that I chose. She's also a badass. She's voiced everything from like Cinderella to she's doing the voice of Jean Grey on the new X-Men cartoon. Her IMDb page is crazy. She's great. She's also been doing a lot of fighting for like actors' rights against AI usage and all that kind of stuff. She's amazing. I love her. Anyway, Jennifer Hale did voice work in a cartoon movie called Rock Dog. It looked like a movie, but that was with J.K. Simmons, who is in La La Land with Finn Whitrock.
Awesome. It looked like a movie.
It looked like one of those bad animated movies where the celebrity voice cast is doing all the heavy lifting.
It looked like a movie. So, Ishel.
Yes. So I did Josh O'Connor, who was in, what was that movie called? Challenger? Yeah. And he does, look at me. And he does play some queer characters in other things. I watched him in History of Sound. Oh, that was a lovely experience. And something else. But anyway, I used Josh O'Connor. And he is in Wake Up Dead Man, one of the Knives Out movies. And Mila Kunis is in that. He's in that with her. And then she is in Luckiest Girl Alive, apparently. with Finn Whitrock.
Yes. We actually did a special live stream discussing Luckiest Girl Alive, by the way.
Really? Was it
Yeah.
good?
Yeah, it's heavy trigger warnings for sexual assault because
Ooh,
that's
gotcha.
what the movie is about. It's a hard watch. It's a really hard watch because of that part. I mean, it's a good movie. I'm not a Mila Kunis fan anymore at all. So I have a really hard time with her and her stupid flippin' husband, Ashton Kutcher. Ugh, yucky. Basically, everybody from that 70s show, except for Topher Grace, are pieces of trash. Pretty much almost all of them. That's why Topher Grace was always the one that was like not hanging out with all of them because he knew. Even though I still love that show.
You just wanted to do Spider-Man, man.
So I had quite a few ones that I was toying with. I decided to use 911. And in 911, of course, was Peter Krauser, who I adore that man so much. I could have just said Ryan Murphy, but, I try to avoid that as much as possible. And Peter Krauser, of course, was in the incredible 6 Feet Under. If you want to see one of the best character arcs of coming out and coming to terms with your sexuality, David, one of my favorite characters, actually, he was my favorite character on 6 Feet Under. I recommend watching that. Plus, 6 Feet Under is one of the best shows ever on television, period. And of course, Michael C. Hall played David. And Michael C. Hall, of course, also played Dexter, my favorite serial killer. And in Dexter, of course, was Jennifer Carpenter, who played his sister. And Jennifer Carpenter was in the movie A Mouthful of Air with Mr. Finn Whitrock. I love that movie. Heaviest of trigger warnings for depression, postpartum depression, and suicide. Have you ever watched that movie? But I think it is fantastic. Amanda Seyfried is so excellent in it. But thank you, Ashley and Ishelle, for joining me for this episode. I think this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And thank you again to Ishelle for suggesting it. And we're going to go ahead and close out. And Ashley, tell everybody about Talking Like a Teen podcast that you co-host.
Talking Like a Teen podcast is a pop culture podcast that I host with my best friend, Adrian. We talk about all kinds of stuff, the formative pop culture of our youth, silly action movies, all kinds of stuff. We just recently finished up a 3-part retrospective about Weezer's Green album because you can love them or hate them, but you cannot deny that they are interesting. And doing research for it, man, that band is so weird. We could do a whole nother podcast just on that, honestly. But in the meantime, when
Someday,
we're not,
maybe.
Yes.
Put that in the suggestion box.
Don't tempt Adrian. He will make me do it. But go ahead and search that out at tlatpodcast.com. We are TLAT Podcast on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are also tlatpodcast@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Ishelle, tell everybody about Queers and Quills.
Gladly. Queers and Quills is a queer romance book convention that'll be in June of 2027. And we are gathering some of our favorite authors, narrators, and queer-owned bookish vendors to celebrate queer love stories with a whole bunch of readers. And yeah, it'll be a good time. We'll have panels, we'll have some social events, a nice little after party, and we'll just have a literal gay old time. We are starting to announce our authors over the month of June, and then we'll just be announcing some other fun stuff in July and August, and then our tickets will go on sale in September.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will put a link again to the website so you can find more information about that. Thank you. Fergie the dog. I don't know what I can add to this episode with Fergie. Fergie loves horror movies. Fergie loves true crime, and Fergie loves Abbott Elementary, and she's a silly, goofy dog that you can follow on TikTok at Schroeder and Fergs. That's SCH ROEDERANDFERGS. It's long, but it's worth it. To find all our past episodes, including ones we did on, that was a Patreon only, so you could find that on Patreon. Barbie. We've, of course, discussed Halloween. We've discussed Dean Winchester. We've discussed Supernatural. We've discussed 911. We've discussed Ryan Murphy way too much on this show. You can find links to all those past episodes. We haven't discussed Mannequin yet. It'll happen someday. But you can find links to all those past episodes at our website. It's a fandomthingpod.com. And while you're there, consider becoming a Patreon subscriber today. For as little as $3 a month, you get ad-free content. You get episodes a day early. And you also get bonus content. We did do an episode a couple of years ago, maybe it was even last year, talking about Destiel. So you can get more content about that. We have also, because the Vampire Lestat is coming out this month, we've done an episode talking about Interview with the Vampire, the TV series. We did an episode talking about the short-lived show The Winchesters, which was a spinoff of Supernatural. Lots of things over there. And like I said, it's ad-free content and you get episodes a day early. Occasionally, you also win prizes. So click the link in the show notes or go to the Support Us tab on our website, which once again is itsafandomthingpod.com. And I'm very excited because I thought I wasn't going to be able to do this episode because nobody was signing up. But at the last minute, my beautiful, wonderful podcast brain twin, Jen, from my streaming bubble and also from the podcast we co-host, Twin It to Win It, is joining me to talk about Bound. I'm very excited to talk about this movie, like incredibly excited. I tried to talk about this movie a few years ago and not a single person signed up. So I'm very excited that it's not getting canceled again. So that's what we're talking about next week. And then in 2 weeks, we start our 2-week conversation about Queer as Folk. Ishelle will be returning. I don't know if Ken will be here.
Well, we shall see.
It's always a we shall see.
Yeah, it's always a mystery with that one. Yeah.
But Ishelle will definitely be here to talk about season 3 of Queer as Folk. Well, it'll be a 2-parter. And I know we recently had a new listener that is a huge, huge Brian Kinney fan and a huge fan of Brian and Justin. So thank you so much for becoming a new listener. And I know you're going to be listening and tuning into that one. So I'm very excited, of course, to talk about my all-time favorite show again. So until next time, remember, it's a fandom thing. Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, and Free Palestine.